We often tend to think about cyber attacks as moments, like a breach or a vulnerability getting exploited, something breaking. But the stories this week are really kind of about systems doing the wrong thing, now at scale. A phishing platform that can run an entire voice scam without a human on the line, an AI integration where a design choice turns into command execution across thousands of systems, and a restricted model that it turns out isn't actually entirely restricted, or at least not like we'd hoped. And then on the other side, vulnerabilities that move from disclosure to active use almost immediately, while the systems defenders rely on to understand risk are starting to fragment under the new volume of vulnerabilities. So, what you start to see is an environment where more of the work, like building access, scaling it, operationalizing, is being handled by the systems themselves. And once that happens, well, we have to sit down and record a podcast about it. So I'm Sean McMillan, community manager here at Bishop Fox. And this week I am joined by our own analyst 3, Sarah Muriel, senior security consultant 2, Thomas Wilson, and senior managing analyst, Dylan Sparks. Thank you for joining.
What's up?
I want to start this week with a group of stories about trust. We talk about trust a lot, and it's not all episode, but this episode we have a few that kind of fit into this system of systems trusting the wrong thing and then doing too much with that. So, for instance, we have ATHR, that is a AI platform that turns voice phishing into a one-person operation for fee. Uh, it even automates the call itself. We've got the EU age verification app that I think a lot of people are saying, I told you so. It is allegedly hackable in 2 minutes with some pretty scary implications there. And then the MCP issue with Anthropic that shows how a simple AI configuration can turn into full command execution across thousands of systems. Kind of different stories, but they all kind of fall into this pattern of trust getting granted too early, and once it's there, the system just helps it along. So, when I think about this, I think, where is it being established in these flows, and what part of that is like the big target, the easiest part for an attacker to get into?
I mean, these are kind of all over different like realms, right? Because the voice phishing is interesting because that's like the human element.
Yeah.
The mobile app for age verification, that's kind of like sounded like that was more along the lines of just basic shut the front door type like vulnerabilities that weren't being addressed. And like I feel like a lot of it does come down to, as always, I feel like the thing that I harp on all the time is just like, we find vulnerabilities in places where we know that they exist. Like, it's a lot of the same patterns and paradigms just kind of cropping up over and over again.
Yeah. Well, it's like in the voice phishing case, what's the access control being bypassed? Is it simply like the same kind of thing as a regular voice phishing, but what's new about this that makes it any more effective?
I think it's just the simplicity, really, when you look at
Yeah.
it. And I think that's going to be a lot about, what we talk about today with all these different topics is really how AI enables these things, um, and makes them, more accessible, really. So what used to take probably a hand team of like professionals scrubbing audio, right? The technology has drastically changed. So
Yeah.
you can receive inputs faster and scrub and push output faster now too.
Well, this is supposed to be a one-person operation. Like, you sign up for this, and end to end, one person does the whole thing with, I
You
shouldn't
know
even
what
say one
enables that?
person.
Enables that is a cool dashboard, which all of these phishing, like, but seriously, like all of these big phishing,
Yeah.
like, oh, automated by one person, it's like kind of what they're doing is just it's like wiring stuff together in all of these cases. This is just the latest in a long line of this, where it's like, here's a cool dashboard where if you're completely non-technical, you can come in and use this thing that like hypothetically makes it really easy. And then I guess in theory, since it's a service, if there's a bug or somebody has a problem using it, they can just probably use AI to patch it because that's probably how they're building these, right?
Yeah, almost feels like a bad like a MLM kind of thing too, where
Yeah,
it's like, give us $4,000 and now you're a video fisher. Have fun. And they don't care if you're successful. They got $4,000. If you are
right.
successful, they get a cut, and that's cool too.
Hmm.
I think it's also about scale because I mean every kind of phone type operation is like a huge industry, and they usually have like 1,000 people in one building just like side by side talking to people, and if you eliminate that, it's just like it's just so easy. Like that was one of the like that made it not so entry level. The fact that you had to like hire a bunch of people to be talking on the phone.
Yeah, we're looking at like, I don't know about you guys, but the 3 a.m. insomnia YouTube of just watching people pwn these call centers.
I
Like
love
we're
those
now,
Course, yeah.
videos.
yeah, so like, we're moving away from that model now to where like it could
Yeah,
just be an individual in the house. And like that's what'll be interesting to me is seeing how like law enforcement really interacts with that um this new capability, right? Like how do they track and find those individuals now? It's not it's not going to be as simple as it used to be.
Yeah, I wonder if there'll, as a result of this, where it's like you don't have to have the phone bank, but you can still do the phone banking. Like, I wonder if we're going to see a lot more like work from home versions of that sort of scam, right? Like, will that become more distributed? Because, like you said, it's like you watch a Jim Browning video, you're like, oh wow, this is like 30 guys in one place,
Yeah.
and like he hacks their whole domain, and
yeah.
he can like shut them down with the help of the police. But it's like, yeah, if that's distributed places or if it's smaller groups, that's kind of harder to
It's
deal with.
vishing from home.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about this EU age verification app that the founder of Telegram had some very not nice things to say about. And I think the whole conversation around age verification software has been like, we all understand the need to keep children safe online. We get that. The pushback has been, how secure is it? And it seems like 2 minutes to hack it doesn't feel super secure. So how do they get in? How does this system break, basically?
To me, it sounded like basic mobile app, like not following the MASVS during your mobile app development, right? Because like we're talking about super sensitive data, right? Like identity data. I'm not sure
Yeah.
like how far it goes into like, the equivalent of like a social security number. I don't know if that's the material that's stored on these
I
devices.
think the materials, it sounded like, was photos, like
Right.
photos of IDs and biometric
Yeah.
data, basically.
That's that's pretty bad. I
Yeah.
mean, like, it sounded like the issue was that it was not properly encrypted on the phone and that the PIN was easily bypassed. So it's like,
Yeah.
that's the sort of thing where, you'll see it in like a React app that somebody's developing that's like not got high security standards to adhere to. Like, I I feel like this is one of the cases where it's like, oh, because this government organization is developing this app and they're not quite as used to the development process that government regulations affect in the private sector, they're not quite applying them in the same way. And that's a problem, right? Because if somebody
Yeah.
gets, although it's hard to get that data off a phone, right? Like you have to either have physical access to the phone or have some sort of jailbreak on the phone that allows you to take over remotely. But like just a few weeks ago, too, we saw like, oh, there are tools, commercially available tools for cyber criminals that they can use to compromise old iPhones. And there
Right.
probably are a few people in the EU who are using old iPhones and are downloading this app. So,
Sure. Well, exactly. And for age verification, if your kid is just old enough to get a phone, you're going to give them your old iPhone.
mhm.
Like, you're
Yep.
not buying them a brand new. I mean, I'm
No.
not buying a brand new.
Yeah, and I
Ah,
mean, technically, it's not just kids, right? Because it's like everybody has to go through this process. So it's
yeah.
literally everybody in the idea, like with the idea that we're doing this some sort of age verification. And it's like that's like yes, it would be good if we could do this in a way that's like secure, but like basically everything that I've seen come out of this so far has been like not effective. Like the take a picture of your face and like move around to see if we can estimate that you're old enough. And people were taking like Norman Reedus from Death Stranding 2 and like turning his head around, and it's like what?
I feel like it pushes people to like more shady sites because like obviously like
Yeah.
if it's more shady. They're not gonna care if you're 18 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think it just puts people in more danger, even, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Good intentions that try again.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this MCP design flaw with Anthropic, where uh, component is making a trust decision that it shouldn't. And basically, how does that turn into actionable access?
Yeah, I've been digging in recently on our threat enablement and analysis team all around like MCP and SSE, which is the legacy MCP protocol. It's a protocol. SSE is more of a protocol, whereas like MCP is just JSON RPC blasted over HTTP. So it's not really its own protocol. It's more of like a sub protocol. But again, it's interesting. People are, really jumping into AI. People are enabling all sorts of applications internally to access AI through these MCP servers and skills. And already what we've seen from our side of the house, we're seeing a lot of MCP endpoints left open and unauthenticated out there. So, anyone can list some of the resources that you may have in there. And then depending on, again, each endpoint being independently authenticated, once you get that MCP session ID, it really, really depends on how your setup is configured. And it kind of leaves everyone fending for themselves, which I don't really like. To be honest, it feels kind of irresponsible to release an insecure protocol,
Yeah.
um, and then leave it up to the individuals and like the vendors and products to then go in and determine whether or not their products need a security patch or update to fix that. So
Yeah. Well, there's going to be more on that theme coming later in the episode. Security teams having to make a lot of big decisions lately.
I haven't done a ton of interacting with MCP. I was curious, like, if you could sort of help me understand it a little bit, because I've used it in the context of burp, right? Like, you can expose the MCP port from burp, and you can have an agent like review data from that. I haven't used it too deeply, but is like the problem here that like MCP gives access to the agent that then is doing things based on the data that's coming through that like JSON pipeline?
yeah, essentially. So at least what I've been kind of digging into is looking at exposed SSE and MCP endpoints across different public web-facing MCP servers. And then essentially there's different resources like the skills or tools that you can essentially list, and it'll spit it back at you. If it's on an unauthenticated endpoint, it'll spit it back at you, and it uses these things called MCP session IDs. The legacy version, SSE, it's just called a session ID, and that's how it keeps track of basically the conversation that you're having with it. So in some of these, what we found is while some endpoints require authentication, if you don't have authentication on another endpoint, you might still be able to get a valid session ID and then bypass off on another endpoint.
So you're like just injecting new commands into an existing context window. You're like, take whatever you're doing right now and here's some new stuff to do.
Yeah, it's kind of like that, but it really requires people to understand what they are enabling these MCP servers to access, but it's also requiring them to understand the full scope of exactly like what you want people to have. It's almost like role-based access control, but for AI agents. Like think of it that way. And I don't think people are approaching it that way just yet. But I'm sure once they kind of, you know, get their hands on MCP and really start to understand the technology, that's kind of where we'll probably start seeing things shift towards.
For anyone who is only listening and not watching this on YouTube, I feel it's important to point out that Dylan, in that explanation, used air quotes at least 3 times when talking about protocols, skills, and tools. Do with that what you will.
What I'm hearing is this is a great thing to scan for after you get SSRF now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it absolutely. And it's not the SSE is more difficult to actually like exploit at scale just because it's a legacy protocol. What I've found is that you have to essentially establish like a listener. So you hit the SSE endpoint and then it eats your terminal, and it basically will just send you pings to keep the session alive, like a conversation. And from another terminal, you can basically just send that session ID with a new request to whatever endpoint. Like, say you want to list like resources available on it. And if that's unauthenticated, you'll see it pop up in your listener window, and it'll give you a list of everything that you can like see or do basically on there. There's like a tools list endpoint too. That'll tell you everything that like all the baked in tools that you can interact with. And
Well, let's keep on this Anthropic business for a second here and talk about this unauthorized group that has gained access to Mythos. It didn't take that long. Mythos was supposed to be this incredibly like tightly controlled, limited release to, I believe, 40 partners, and very intentional access. And even with all that in place, we already have someone accessing it who was not supposed to through a third-party environment.
Who could have seen unauthorized access when the list
Yeah.
of people who can access this is 40 giant corporations?
I
Yeah.
know it's 40 like it's elite organizations that are doing this, but they are huge.
Right.
Yeah, so it's 40 giant points of failure. Talk about the risk here. Like with giving access to this many organizations, what was the expectation versus the reality?
I mean, there's so many unknowns there, right? Because it's like we're not being told by the Glasswing contributors like what this is really, other than like it's big and it's really good, you know. So it's like it's pretty hard to know what does it mean if somebody gets access, right? Because this is still like a service-based platform where you're talking to you're chatting with a thing, right? Like you're sending message exchanges to a thing that processes the data that you send it, and it gives you responses back, and it might do things based on that, right? Like you would like to hope that Anthropic can just see if somebody is using this in an unintended way with access that they granted, right? You'd hope that within Mythos they're having additional scrutiny in the chat that like they're saying like, hey, this is designed for dual use, like security research, but it could be weaponized. We will make sure anybody who has access to this model, we're tightly monitoring all of that. But
Mhm.
are they doing that? Who knows? Like,
I hope they
this
have a
is
Slack channel at least.
at least.
It does seem odd the amount of like partners they brought in, and I understand like where they were going with the scope of the decision to do that, as in, hey, this is a really big issue. And it's kind of what we're seeing too throughout the community. It's like borrowing someone else's credentials, right? Essentially by bringing in a partner
Yeah.
to like validate that what you think is important is in fact important, so that everyone else in the community accepts that like, I mean, you just said it, no one knows really what this is except these partners who are all like, yes, this is very important because we're working on it. And so
Very
it's like
important.
this, yeah. The work is mysterious and important, like,
Yeah.
and that's Glasswing right now. It's
Yeah.
just kind of like, all right, yeah.
Because I mean, I would just be curious to like be on the other side of, you know, the curtain, right? And like what are these companies actually doing with access to this model right now, right? Like are they genuinely working on research in new vulnerabilities? Are they working on new tool development that's for security purposes? Because ostensibly this is a security tool, but like at what point is that just too many cooks in the kitchen, right? Like if this is supposed to be a
Yeah.
tool that's like for security research, you'd think that you'd be like, let's tightly bound that. But if everybody's just like, oh, you know, are people out there using Mythos to like generate new fancy AI derived user interfaces, right? Like, is that where, you know, like who's to say what's being done with it?
Yeah. I think, are we at a point where we talk about AI moving at scale and pushing things forward at scale? And like going forward, I don't know that there's a way to do a project like this and not have potential for exactly this happening.
I think the interesting thing too is like how it was advertised, right? Like I don't know, man. If this was really that dangerous, would you publicly be like, "Hey, we built a super nuke
Yeah.
and no one come looking over here for it." Like,
Right.
But there's a sticker
like,
on
what
it
are we?
that says
Yeah,
only for good guys.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Like, what were we thinking?
It does
Um,
feel like it was all marketing a little bit, like, until we see something concrete come out of it, at which point maybe it'll be like, "Oh, wow, I'll eat crow," right? But
yeah,
Yeah.
it feels like this is part of the marketing, and somebody getting access to this, whether they have it or not, right, is just a sign that, like, if we even have to go through this hypothetical process now after the fact, clearly that wasn't really thought out well enough by Glasswing themselves with the way that they rolled this out, right? Like, if this is enough to cause waves, just the claim that you get access to it, then what does actual access to it look like, right? I don't know.
Yeah. You mentioned if something comes out of this, this is like since the announcement of Project Glasswing, this is the biggest news about Project Glasswing. So this is what has come out of it so far. All right, let's move on. We've got this Windows story by Bleeping Computer. It's a little more straightforward. You've got recently disclosed zero-day vulnerabilities that are already being used in active attacks, specifically to gain system-level or admin privileges. So this isn't just your run-of-the-mill bug. This is attackers quickly taking something public and turning it into a reliable way to escalate access. And they get their foothold, and this kind of lets them upgrade it into something persistent and very difficult to remove. What's the value of this type of privilege escalation in a real attack chain instead of just, being a technically interesting thing?
Anti-authority system's awesome to get control over. It's closer to root in the Windows environment than, admin is. And if you can do that, right, like if you can get that level of access on a machine, you can essentially hijack the access of any other user on that machine. You can take whatever tickets you want. It's, if you can do that on a terminal server, that's awesome, because then your lateral and like upwards movement is so much more viable.
yeah. I think the significance of it too is Windows is one of the most popular operating systems out there for corporate environments. And what are corporate environments? Money making machines, baby.
Uh-huh.
So, where would you rather be on like my Linux laptop or
Right.
somebody's Windows server? But yeah, it's interesting too because priv escalation is a little bit different, right, than initial access. You have to have some sort of foothold either on the system or in the network somewhere. And then privilege escalation is interesting because we're using native tools. You can't just
Yeah.
delete these things or remove these system binaries that are essential for the operating system to run. So living off the land is always super cool. A pain for security teams because you have to run this stuff. You can't just all right, shut down
Yeah.
all of the Windows servers until we figure this out. And until then, you're running around playing whack-a-mole, right? So like the more avenues you have for privilege escalation, like harder it is for those security teams to catch you and to stop you.
Red Sun in particular was kind of an interesting one too, because it seems like a real pain to deal with. I'm not sure what the telemetry would look like on the back end. This might be a little bit more identifiable, but literally the problem is that if you download a file with a mark of the web that like looks like a malicious file, Defender removes it and rewrites it. And so manipulating that, you could download something that's obviously malware. Defender will rewrite it to an arbitrary location, and then you can use that to take over system. And that's just really funny. Complete like reversal of the function of Defender. But even then, like I remember I saw the tweet for this like a week ago, like maybe the start of this week or something like that. And the guy who dropped it was saying that he was like in talks with Microsoft and it was just moving so slow, which given a lot of people who do a little bit more gray hat type like vulnerability disclosure, that could just be optics. But it's a story you hear a lot from vulnerability guys, which is like, I found this vuln and it's not getting addressed fast enough. I'm just dropping it. And that's kind of what happened here.
All right. And finally, we have this story of NIST. Their cutback of CVE handling impacts cyber teams. This is just like NIST said, you know what? We're not doing this anymore. They've basically taken their enrichment process and turned it into, we're going to focus on what on known exploitable vulnerabilities and what protects government systems. And the rest of you, good luck. Am I missing it? Is that basically the summary here?
I I think there was some level of like NIST trying to keep the doors, the lights on CVE categorization for like a couple of months. Like I feel like this is a very politically informed cutback that they're not entirely in control of.
Yeah.
So they tried to keep that around as long as they could, and now it's just like this is unfeasible for that organization to do. And that is unfortunate because that helps nobody.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. I think this is something that, at least we on the T team, um, Richard Brown actually just dropped a pretty sweet blog post about it.
Which is very good. I will say, yeah.
Yeah, definitely worthwhile checking that out. But we've kind of been scaling with this in mind. Like we've known there have been the signals, like you just said, for months. And especially with the rollout of AI, there's more and more CVEs just being pumped in and flooded every day. And
Yeah.
so what this is kind of really is like a scaling back of what actually deserves further analysis. It's like a reprioritization of CVEs and what actually is worth looking at and what isn't. And to be honest, I think a lot of the larger security teams, if they weren't, this is your heads up, like, hey, please start doing this process, like
Yeah.
reviewing these things internally and figuring out a prioritization chain. But yeah, I think this really impacts a lot of the smaller companies and a lot of the smaller organizations that don't have those resources. They don't have the luxury of, a few people or AI enabled folks to go review hundreds of CVEs and determine, does this even impact us? Right.
Yeah. And it's only, I mean, with automated scanning and all that kind of stuff, like there's so many coming in that teams, I think, are already kind of getting that
Noise.
crunch.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a lot of noise.
Like, I don't even know if I would say that like one and done, like you're running Nessus scans is like so impactful for an organization, but for like small companies where it's like your security team isn't even a blue team, you don't have like more than one guy on incident
Yeah.
response, like you're going through a ton of data, and a lot of this stuff just as we get less and less stuff truly categorized, not only do you like have more noise that you can't understand, but like you just are losing fidelity in data, period. Like you just don't have data. Stuff doesn't go through the same CVE process. If it's not listed in, NIST's database, people are going to be like, okay, what are the latest vulnerabilities? I'll look at NIST, and that is missing like 90% of the stuff that came out in the year or something like that, right? Like that's the worst case scenario. And then people just genuinely don't know what the risk is, and
Yeah.
they've got scanners that do nothing for them that they're now paying a ton of money for, unless of course those scanners are going to be doing their own categorization. So it's like this is like shoving all of this into the private sector. Like now every organization is responsible for doing this. Like you go where you will, and it's like the lack of standards can't be good.
And then I thought that was the last one, but we actually have one other, the Coast Guard cybersecurity rules. So basically, they're formalizing how organizations should manage cyber risk. But, like most compliance type efforts, they are relying on assumptions about how access is controlled, monitored, that kind of stuff. I mean, this is all it all reinforces this idea of your team needs to be smart or get smart.
I mean, fair.
Yeah, I mean, like, Coast Guard enters 21st century
Yeah.
of cybersecurity, understands, hey, we need framework. Like, that's kind of what it really feels like. They now understand that, you know, all of these devices, if there's a signal, someone's trying to get access to it, right? Whether it's an IoT device or it's one of these small little widgets that just sends status updates on like a, a rig's like health and status checkup.
Yeah.
Somebody wants that data somewhere. I don't know for what, but if they're looking for it, like, we've learned in cybersecurity that you just have to lock down almost everything. Any little bit of information to help the attacker is like just one step forward for them. and you don't want to give them anything easy.
In the 90s or like early 2000s, wasn't it the Coast Guard who had like the ban on Furbies, where it was like these are not allowed on government owned vessels
No
because there's a
way.
possibility that they might have listening devices because they're so ubiquitous. They're not manufactured in the United States. Like there is some that may be a rumor, but like that's the kind of mindset that I would expect like the Coast Guard to have around this. So like if they're not already operating on that level, while it's
Yeah.
like, there are ships that we have that are out there potentially in a wartime scenario that are not like that are saying like, yeah, bring all the Furbies on board. I'm a little worried if that's the level that they were at before, but I think it's good to check all of your egress and ingress.
Well,
I
there
think
was a Cloud Pets. I don't know if you recall that from a few years back. It was little stuffed animals that you could record a message for your child on. Like they could push the paw and it would say, "Good night, buddy," something like that.
That's
And they
awesome.
they banned them because it was Chinese spyware, I believe. We had one, and when I read
hell
that, we
yeah.
ripped the batteries out. I'm not kidding. We ripped the batteries out and put it in like an airtight box.
Nice. I mean, that's that's cool. I think that's just cool. If your espionage is done in the form of a nice little plushie, then I think, you kind of deserve that data.
Yeah. Well, I think if you zoom out, most of these are kind of stories about getting access by leaning on things that were already trusted. Some version of that seems to come up every week, whether that's a person, a process, a system, or a teddy bear that just assumes the right thing is happening when it's not. I super appreciate all of you joining. Dylan, Thomas, Sarah, thank you so much. If you found this useful, share it within your organization. We will be back next week. Until then, stay safe.